Welcome back. And in this segment, we will be talking about the importance of Sinai as not just a place sacred for the various religions, but also as an important and integral part of Egypt, which was shaped the history of Egypt since antiquity. We will be talking about its importance throughout the ages, starting from the Pharaonic era. And I'm happy to have with me today Egyptologist Mr. Samir Abbass. He's also a tourism expert. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Russia.
Good morning, sir. Let's first of all, before we talk about anything, let's talk about the importance of Sinai in history, because just as mentioned, Sinai has a very important and significant role in our lives, starting from ancient times.
So that was a good introduction, which is Russia made, and I would like to push the timeline to 30,000 BC. So we know that Egypt history started 3000 BC by Narmer and the foundation, but actually the history of Sinai can be pushed back to 30,000 BC in prehistory. And prehistory is a big deal in Egypt, which is not well studied because we don't have much written documentations from this period of time, but we have an evidence that there is an early settlements, human settlements that inhabited Sinai as early as 30,000 BC. So moving forward to the historical period of time, which is by the unification, Egypt North and South, Narmer or Mina, and we are talking about 5,000 years ago. And if you made a visit to the Egyptian Museum, you will find there is some tablets dates back to the Old Kingdom, showing and proving that the ancient Egyptian kings they recognized and they considered Sinai as an integral part of Egypt, of their kingdom. So there is a misconception that Egypt in the eye of the Egyptians back in that time is only referred to the Nile Valley, but actually the ancient Egyptian kings, they, especially as early as the Old Kingdom 5,000 years ago, they made sure that they will extend these boundaries and these territories to a far distance, including Sinai. More specified, the king Senefru, he's one of my favorite kings, not well known unfortunately, but one of very favorite kings. He's one of the greatest builders of the Egyptian kings, by the way, in Egyptian history. His son became very well known, even more famous than him, which is King Khufu. We know him because of the Great Pyramid, but actually Senefru, he's the one who told the Egyptians, or during his time, the pyramids has been perfected. So he left 3 pyramids behind himself, and he left us a very valuable tablet in Sinai. In this tablet, he showed himself as a warrior, smiting or punishing the enemies. The enemies, in his perspective and the Egyptian perspective in that time, those who are trying to come and take over the Egyptian lands. And even when this king is known as a just king, he didn't hesitate to introduce himself as a very powerful king, warrior king in Sinai. And that's one of the very important evidence, and that's push the Egyptian occupation or the Egyptian considering Sinai as their own territory as early as the Old Kingdom, as early as 5,000 years ago.
Well, also Sinai was a very important route from which all the military or the armed forces marched in antiquity, where they launched their campaigns, which reached up to the Euphrates at certain times. The importance of it as a passageway for the ancient Egyptian army, and how far did we reach, and during which eras?
So first of all, the Egyptians in ancient time, in medieval, in Islamic period, Christian period, in Greek and Roman, in all of these periods, and even in the modern time, so they realized that Sinai is a gateway to Egypt.
Yes.
And I'm afraid to say that most of the troublemakers who came and invaded Egypt, they came through Sinai. And that's why when the ancient Egyptians decided to make a military route, an army route in Sinai, they named it after the most important god and the most famous god dealing with war, which is that Horus. It's called Horus route. And they made everything possible, all of the infrastructures like fortress and wells along this route to make sure that the Egyptian army, even back in that time, thousands of years ago, they can have an easy access to Sinai to defend Egypt. So Sinai is a great gift to Egypt. But unfortunately, Sinai, in most of the historical period, that was a gate from which many of the invaders, as early as the Hyksos, as early as Mesopotamians, Persians, Alexander, many actually, and in modern time, when in 1967, when during the Israeli occupation, Sinai was always the gateway to Egypt.
And from here, talking about Sinai as a gateway, and also how Egyptians throughout ages, they were able to protect actually their homeland. And we have seen this not only, we're talking about the victory of the 6th of October war, but just as you mentioned, since ancient times. And definitely there were many challenges in Sinai. We have seen the developments taking place, and now Sinai is one of the most important areas all around the world, talking about Sinai, talking about all the developments that took place, the diversification of the tourism product. Now it is one of the most important sites, a dream to anyone to come to visit and to spend his vacation in Sinai.
So in Egypt, Sinai is known for everybody as a place for beaches, for water sports, for diving, for safari tours. A few days ago I attended a lecture about bird watching, and Sinai is a very good place for bird watching as well. That should be added to tourism map in Sinai. And there is a very good business in most of the bird watchers. They are paying a ridiculous amount of money to come. They can spend a week just to spot one bird. And when I looked at the maps, explain the immigrations of birds across Africa, from Europe to Africa, Sinai and North Egypt was always a favorite stop of many of these birds. So there is many other types of tourism can be added the existing one. So we are really successful in the existing one. And I have traveled in different countries, and diving in Egypt is far less expensive and more perfect and safer than many other places. So I think that we should consider having a national project in introducing bird watching, not only to Sinai, to Egypt in general as well. And there is always something which makes me sad when I think about Sinai and tourism in Sinai. Most of the resort there is designed for rich class, tourists and rich class. The majority of the Egyptians, which is we would like them to go and see and visit and explore Sinai, they cannot afford that. So I think that a national project like giving lands for free for investors, they are ready to make a budget accommodations, which could be, and giving them tax free as long as they will use it only for the Egyptians, and they can rent it for a very not selling. You know, the idea of selling is not a good idea. Just renting. Look at the North Coast and what's happening in the North Coast. So renting that for middle class and why not poor class Egyptian families, and encouraging Egyptians to go and see that could be a good national project.
Well, also Sinai is known for religious tourism, where many of the prophets entered from Sinai to Egypt, including, of course, the route of the Holy Family. And there were talks about reviving that route. What could you tell us about it?
So I would like to push the timeline, the religious timeline, further back again. Yes. So talking about religion, we shouldn't miss talking about the ancient Egyptian religion, which is very well represented in Sinai. So Sarabit al-Khadim, a temple dedicated to Hathor, the goddess of beauty and motherhood, and that was located in an area which is it considered a mine in Sinai for semi-precious stone, and that's one of the reasons why the ancient Egyptian kings and governments, they have an interest in Sinai, because there is lots of minerals, and there is still many of these minerals and resources still available until today. So the ancient Egyptian religion has been introduced in Sinai. Abraham, the biblical Abraham or Ibrahim, most probably his route to Egypt was through Sinai. So we have history in the Old Testament, and we have a famous tomb in Bani Hassan talking about Abraham, or Ibsha, according to the ancient Egyptian text, visit with his wife Sarah and his family to Egypt, and definitely he came across Sinai. And Joseph, and Moses afterwards, and the Israelites during Moses' time, and during Joseph's time, and then during Moses as well. And Sinai was a way to come to Egypt, and as a way to flee from Egypt during the Exodus as well. And then we'll come to the Holy Family and the route escaping or fleeing from Jerusalem across Sinai to Egypt, traveling along the Nile Valley and desert, and coming back again within about 3 years. That also happened in Sinai. And then Islam, when Islam was introduced into Egypt, that was also introduced into Sinai. So, and there is a very good market for that, by the way. It's called the pilgrim tours, and more specified, like when we mention some sites associated with religion in Sinai, Ayun Musa or Moses Springs. That is just across the Suez Canal, the tunnel. You drive southwards, and that is the first attraction you stop at, which is Moses Spring. According to the biblical text, traditionally they used to be 12, but there is few of them still exist today. And there is many people actually coming from all over the world. They come to stop in this area. And when you travel south, you make it to St. Catherine, and through a beautiful valley to make it there. And there is more beautiful valleys around the monastery as well. Even if you are not very religious and not believing that that was the mountain where Moses received the 10 Commandments, is still beautiful valleys to hike there. So you cannot imagine how many people they come in a pilgrim tours. They stop in pilgrim sites in different places in the Middle East, including Egypt, and they come across the border for St. Catherine Monastery, which lies in Wadi Raha, which is the place where the Israelites camps, and where Moses, behind the monastery there is a big mountain, the second highest mountain in Egypt. That's traditionally where Moses received the 10 Commandments. So there is a very big market for that.
Talking about Sinai and also talking about the Egyptian armed forces, because we know this is the first armed forces in history. And of course, when it comes to Sinai or to the collaboration, nowadays when we talk about the Egyptian armed forces, for example, not everyone abroad, they understand the relation between the normal citizen and the armed forces. Maybe the idea that from each and every house here, we have an officer, we have a soldier. It is an integral part in our life, actually, the armed forces here, or the Egyptian armed forces. And also talking about the collaboration among all Egyptians when it comes to support their armed forces. So if I talked about the same concept in history, and I know that it existed since the very beginning of history. So tell us more about the history of the armed forces in general, the Egyptian, how the Egyptians used to be. Tell us more about this.
So in history, Egypt as a country is the first unified or the first organized governments, and safety and security, that was very important for them in that time. And there is quite a funny and interesting fact about the reason why armed forces started in Egypt back in that time. That was to protect Egypt and defend Egypt from the illegal immigrations. Back in that time, there was no big armies, or there was no countries which they can cause threat to Egypt back in that time, to about 5,000 years ago, 3000 BC. But the main threat why Egypt and the Egyptians became unified and built an army was to stop the illegal immigration. So the illegal immigration, which is happening now, the opposite way from North Africa to Europe. Back in the old days, it used to happen from the Middle East, across Sinai, and from the Mediterranean Sea, across the Mediterranean Sea to the Egyptian coast. So the Egyptians in that particular stage, they figured out that they might lose their identity if they haven't came together to unify their land and protect their identity and built a force to protect that. We have lots of reference for that. In every temple, when you see the Egyptian king holding his mace or weapon, smiting the head, that's a symbolic thing. That's something which we don't say that he was doing that every day, a symbolic thing. When he's doing that, he is referring to the enemies of Egypt, the illegal immigrants. And there is another good reference by Habu Temple, Ramesses III, which is the first recorded marine battle. So now we need to introduce that to the people, to make them feeling proud of their achievements. And there is a very good chance there is some military museums scattered in Sinai. One of the most famous of them, which is across the street from Moses Spring. Again, just it could be like less than 2 hour driving from here. It depends on the traffic across the tunnel, because that's another issue now. And it used to be an Israeli like an army unit, and very well protected, has been taken over during 1973 6th of October war, and that was in a courageous move. And we have almost everything intact. We have their cannons, we have their equipments, we have their furnitures, even the toothpaste is still there. Further, like north of Ayun Musa or Musa Spring museum, we have another one which is Tabbat al-Shajara, that is across Suez Canal from Ismailiyah, and that's very well preserved with the tanks and cars and equipments and there, and that could be a very good place to visit. Add to that, there is many other army museums of 6th of October, and one of the best military museums here is the one in the Citadel. And another one not to miss is Alamein, which is introducing Egypt and many other countries around the world as well.
Well, I'd like to thank you very much, Egyptologist and tourism expert Mr. Samir Abbass, for this interview, and thank you for being with us here, celebrating together the victory of the 6th of October from the Unknown Soldiers Memorial. Thank you very much.
I'm very glad to be with you, Russia, and Nashua today.
Thank you.